So today I'm going to show you how to make delicious flaky buttery biscuits from basically 3 ingredients. And I'm going to show you how to do it either on stovetop. I'm going to tell you how you could do it on stovetop, and I'm going to show you how to just bake it. Now, first of all, I didn't use whole milk because, as you can see, the whole milk prices were ridiculous. So I used these ingredients. I used what I had, which was heavy cream. But you could use, I know Wick is giving skim milk, and I know skim milk is usually cheaper. You could use that kind of milk. You could use whole milk. You could use powdered milk. But here I'm going to show you, I'm adding to this bowl the flour and the basically the dry ingredients, which is a little bit of salt, which is optional, and which is also self-rising flour. Now, if you didn't want to use self-rising flour, you could go and get baking soda, baking powder, and add it to regular flour. But this is the fastest I came up with, was chilled butter bits or chopped up real fine, self-rising flour, and some sort of milk. You can even use coconut milk. Okay, so I'm adding the heavy cream to the batter, to the dry ingredients with the butter. And the recipe calls for about 2/3 cup of milk to about 1/3 cup of flour. But you'll want to play around with those ratios so that you can get the consistency of the batter just right. Because if you put too much flour, then the batter gets dry, right? It'll look very dry. And then when you go to pat it out, your biscuits will still rise and you'll still have biscuits, but they'll be basically hard to choke down. So you want to add more milk to make sure that the batter is sticky, like the consistency of cookie dough or homemade cookie dough. You see, it's very moist. So at first it was dry, so I had to add a little bit more milk because, the ratios are going to be what they are depending on how much you put inside of that scooper or your measuring cup. So I would advise not to dip it, but to ladle it over. And so here I'm adding flour to the cutting board, and I'm going to just pour that out. Again, I'm mixing with the chopstick because it gives the least amount of interference. All I'm doing is combining and just barely getting any action going with the mixture. And as I pour this onto the cutting board, I'm going to take some flour, add it to my hand, and I'm using just one hand here in very light pressure. So I'm going to pick it up, and I'm going to basically dust all sides of it so it doesn't stick to my hand. I don't want to lose the batter. And I'm just going to fold it over itself. Now, as you're folding over yourself, you may need to add a little extra flour. And before you fold like that, you can add extra chilled butter if you want more buttery layers. Then before you make the next fold, add more butter right there. You could do it just like that. In this recipe, I didn't do that. But you can also, before you go to folding it out, while it's still in the bowl, you can add cheddar and you'll see how it'll turn out. So here at this point, it's done. I just did maybe 4 or 5 folds. I don't want to do too much. And now it's time to cut it. You can even use a knife, or you could use a biscuit cutter, but something sharp, cold, and clean to get clean borders. And now that's my biscuit, my first biscuit that's going to go for bake, right? It's not perfect, but hey, it's going to taste perfect. Okay, and then, so now I'm forming up the other piece because I don't want to make that one really dense and, falling apart. So I'm going to go ahead and flip it a couple more times. And then I'm going to cut off those edges so that I can have pretty much even sized biscuit. Again, I'm using my knife because it's just the simplest way to go. And if you wanted to make this a bigger recipe, you could just double it. You could just double the recipe, or you could just play around with your whatever baking dish you have and pour it in kind of like you would do a cornbread and cut it later. Okay, and so now that I have my 2 patted out, I'm going to go ahead and move to baking it. I forgot to show a picture of it inside of my baking dish, but this is the glass dish I use. You can also cook these on the stovetop in a nonstick pan with a lid, and you're basically keeping the heat inside of the pan and keeping it at a low to medium heat. Now the biscuits will rise and cook gently and slowly, but you just have to monitor the heat. It takes about 3 to 6 minutes on each side. And so what you'll find is the final product is a golden brown, really flaky, really light, because you didn't press too hard on the dough, biscuit. Add your butter, honey butter, whatever you want to add to it, and eat it fresh. You'll have crispiness at the bottom and top. You can put it with a meal, and you could do whatever you want. Add gravy, and here's the recipe. I'll leave it up for a couple of seconds so you can grab a screenshot or you could write it down. Have a nice day. Let me know how they turn out in the comments. Thanks.